Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is the next talk, as you can see, in the collaborative speaker series, Dialogues in European Jain Studies. We are a collaborative speaker series between Arihanta Institute, Ghent University, and University of Birmingham. And today, as you can see, we're going to have this wonderful dialogue on changing lay-mendicant relationships. Before we begin, I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping to let you all know how the event will work. You will hear the talks, and at the end of the talks, we will have a Q&A and discussion session with the audience. And so if you want to participate in that, which we really encourage you to do, please click on the Q&A box in the bottom of your Zoom screen, and feel free to type questions and ask questions to our speakers, which will be moderated. We will also send some messages for registration in case you're interested in registering for future events. You can see we have a number of events on March 10th, April 14th, as well as May 19th. We just added this last event on May 19th, New Research in Jain Studies. This will be the final event this year with John Court and a number of graduate students who will be also participating and presenting their new research. So we will post that link in the chat so you can see that and hopefully register for that event as well. With that being said, I'm going to now hand over the microphone to my colleague at Ghent University, Professor Tine Wekemans, who will introduce the event and our speakers. Thank you, Tine.
Okay. Hi, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you and welcome to all of you here, speakers as well as audience. So today we will take some time to discuss the changes in Jain lay-mendicant relations. And for that, we have a dialogue between two really interesting scholars. So Shivani Bothra of the California State University at Long Beach will be the first full-length talk. She works at the Department of Religious Studies as an assistant professor, and before that you might know her from her postdoctoral work at Rice University in Houston, or indeed her work as a lecturer at Santa Barbara. Her PhD is from the University of Wellington in New Zealand, and I first met her in Jaipur, which was a lovely experience altogether. So her focus is on different aspects of Jainism, including lay-mendicant relationships and changes and challenges there. She's also done some lovely work on transnational Jainism and contemporary Jainism in education. So the second leg of this dialogue will be presented by Leonardo Stockler, who is speaking to us from the University of Birmingham, where he's currently undertaking an internship, which I don't know any details about. I'll have to ask you guys later. He holds a degree, a master's degree of, I've been told to pronounce it, PUC Sao Paulo, the University of Sao Paulo, and is pursuing a PhD made possible through a collaboration of the International School for Jain Studies and that same university. He studied Prakrit, and I'm sure he's been working quite a bit on modern yoga and comparative philosophy, but today he will also talk to us about exchanges between Śrāvakas and Jain ascetics. Now, this dialogue will be introduced by our expert for today, and we're very happy to have her, Luitgard Soni, who is speaking to us from Austria, I assume. She holds a PhD in philosophy from Salzburg University, but then also studied in Benares at BHU for quite some time after being affiliated to the University of Marburg, both in Indology and Tibetology and in German studies. Her work, as most of you will know, has been on different aspects of Jaina literature, but also more recently on death and dying in the Jain tradition. If you haven't looked into it, I can only recommend you do so. So without further ado, I will first hand it over to you, Luitgard, to give us a bit of an introduction on the topic, and then we will hear the dialogue between first Shivani and then Leonardo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A very good day to all of you, and special thanks to the trio of Tina, Marie-Hélène, and Christopher for inviting me to this innovative dialogue series. Our topic is the ever-fascinating relationship in a system of diverging, yet complementary social bonds, as we can see in the Jaina Chaturveda Sangha, the fourfold community of monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen. Different shades of renouncing the world stand next to different ways of living a true samyak, meaningful worldly life. In the rich medieval didactic story literature, the Dharmakathas, the key word for renunciation is vairagya, the disinterest and, in fact, disgust with existence, and seeking liberation from it. But householders, aristocrats, and merchants, men and women of the lay community, cleverly walk and work their lives with economic and emotional interests, yet ideally without attachment. In my short preamble to today's stream, I'm selecting two prototypes of laypersons. I'm beginning with the ancient type of the Upasaka, testified in the Shvetambara canon as well as mentioned in the Shatkana Agama, and thematized in several stories. The seventh anga of the canon is called Upasaka Dashaha, the 10 chapters of lay attenders. It starts with the rich layman Ananda, who is guided by Mahavira on his path to gradually renounce wealth, etc., and who ends his life with the vow of Salekana and dies the good religious death. The Upasaka Ananda exemplifies the path of the lay aspirant, resembling more and more the path of the mendicant. Without initiation, the Upasaka progresses spiritually on the ladder of the 11 pratimas, keeping increasingly the restrictive vows, abandoning all householders' activities, leading up to the renunciation of the world. My second prototype of a Jaina layperson is the Śrāvaka, the Śrāvika, the hearer who listens to the Jain teacher and implements the Jaina Dharma in thought, word, and deed, and keeps the 12 laypersons' vows, consisting in the basic 5 lesser vows and those enhancing them. Hemachandra's model of a Mahashravaka, the perfected layperson, fulfills these 12 vows and excels in dana. He or she cultivates the religious gifting, which is indispensable for the functioning of the symbiosis between ascetics and lay people, in other words, for the survival of the Jaina community. The fields or kshetra of the dana vrata extend, however, far beyond the basic needs of the community and serve the strengthening and glorification of the religion by setting up Jaina images, temples, and copying and keeping the scriptures and so on. In locating the religious basis of the Jaina Dharma in the early doctrinal compendia, we find that the term samyaktva is decisive. The issue is the rightness or trueness regarding the 3 ratnas. Umaswami's Tattva Sutta begins immediately with the word samyak. So samyak darshana jnana charitrani moksha margaha. This is the first verse. Right faith, right knowledge, and right conduct together constitute the path to liberation. Without going here into the highly intricate matter of what is right faith, etc., let me turn to what the early teachers say about the supporting pillars, the so-called alambanas of samyaktvas, to be upheld by the believers. There are 8 angas, or auxiliaries of samyaktva, meant to strengthen rightness or trueness. The first 4 are rather individual personal qualities like freedom from doubt, from desire, from repugnance, and any wrong belief. The further four auxiliaries are described in positive terms as contributing to the growth of Samyaktva. These are qualities that are directed outward towards the religious community, to the Jaina Dharma status in the whole society. They are, to say, also political guidelines for the support of the religion. The first is Upagurana, that is, protecting the religion by concealing or correcting the faults committed by fellow members of the faith. The second is Stitikarana, that is, strengthening the faith of fickle-minded ones. With the third, Prabhavana, the faith is to be propagated by spectacular good deeds like almsgivings, temple building, austerities, promoting learning, etc. And the fourth is Vatsalya, the kind assistance to the members of the community and also others. Each of these pillars supporting Samyaktva is abundantly illustrated by various exemplary tales in the Dharmakathas. They are edifying and they are to be told in sermons, study circles at home, during pilgrimages and religious events. Let me conclude my preliminary remarks about lay-mendicant relationship with one story illustrating the concept of Upagurana mentioned above, namely correcting the fault committed by a monk. The story is related in different sources, and for the purpose here I'm considerably shortening a version from the 10th century Brihatkatha Kosha. The righteous king Śrāvaka hears that the Muni had arrived in his town, and in order to pay respect to him, he goes with his entourage to meet the monk. As he approaches, he notices that the Muni is busy catching fish from a tank, using a net and collecting the fish in a basket. King Śrāvaka immediately descends from his elephant, circumambulates the monk and greets him with reverence. Standing in front of him, bent down in humility, Śrāvaka tells him, "Someone who follows the mendicant path to liberation ought not to kill fish, since that increases the cost of existences. Therefore, give me your net, I'll collect the fish for you in the basket, and you, O sadhu, keep aloof." Without a word, the monk gives the net to the king, who throws it in the water. At this, the Muni prevents him, telling him that he did not need more fish and lauds him as a good Jaina. This is just the gist of the story of King Śrāvaka and the fish-catching Muni, which reveals a decisive interference of a layman into the inappropriate conduct of a monk, while respecting his mendicant status. It is quite spectacular that King Śrāvaka venerates a fishing Muni and then himself undertakes to perform the unroyal and sinful act of fishing. The king does it in a demonstrative manner, acting out the model relation between a layman towards a monk. As a layman, he makes good for the misbehavior of the monk by taking the sin upon himself, albeit not without pointing out the mendicant's breach of behavior and reminding him of his ascetic duties. In this way, he publicly sets the criteria for the right way of upholding the respect for the mendicant status as such, but at the same time guarding the Jaina principles and rules. What I have done is given you a very brief and fragmentary look back at past sources, and now we are going to learn about the current state of lay-mendicant relationship. Thank you very much, and I give the word to Leonardo, I guess.
Shivani.
I'm sorry, to Shivani. Mixed it up.
We changed, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Luitgard, for such a wonderful context and background of what we are going to say now. And thank you, Chris, Tina, and Mary for this invitation. As I just said that although it is overwhelming, but it is a joy to participate and share one's work. So thank you very much once again. Greetings to all the participants who are here wanting to know more about this confusing relationship between mendicants and lay in the Jain tradition. So I start with my talk formally now. One of the many confusing confusing issues in the present day Jain traditions is the question of lay mendicant relationships. Neither of the two main branches, Digambars and Shvetambars, are untouched by this confusion. While I was exploring, although confusing but a fantastic topic, I did not start on a blank slate. I came across two fascinating papers by Michael Carruthers and John Coate, respectively, who discussed the question to some extent. While Michael Carruthers examined the Digambar Jains in southern India and John Coate examined the Murti Pujak Shwetambar Jains in Gujarat, although they discuss this question, while I draw from their works and complement with textual sources and my own field work with the Jains in Jaipur, a different geographic location, I focus on the Jain mendicant relationship in the present times, although we can't just talk about the present without peeping into the past or the textual sources. So I will begin my talk with a well-known narrative that beautifully illustrates the deep relationship between lay followers and mendicants in the Jain tradition. Once upon a time, Mahavira was passing through the town of Kausambi, and at that time he was unwell. So from his own omniscient knowledge, he knew that in this town there is a devoted lay woman called Revati Śrāvaka, and she had prepared two types of preserves. One is the Kushmandu preserve of Ashgod, and the other is grapefruit preserve. She had specifically prepared the Kushmandu preserve with devotion and intention to serve and offer it to Mahavira himself. Mahavir, adhering to the strict discipline of a mendicant, sent one of his monk Muni Jai Singh disciples to Revati's house with precise instructions. He should only bring back the grapefruit preserve, not the Kushmandu preserve, since that was exclusively meant for Mahavira. This Mahavir received the grapefruit jam, he had it, and he was cured from the illness. Although this is a long story, but I have cut the story short, but this simple yet profound narrative highlights two key aspects of lay mendicant relations: Dan, charitable giving, and bhakti, which is devotion. The laity, represented by Revati, expressed their devotion by offering alms with deep reverence, while the mendicants maintained strict discipline, receiving what is offered without personal preference and attachment. In turn, the act of dan grants spiritual merit, punya, to the lay donor, purifying their karma and bringing them closer to liberation, which is moksha. This reciprocal dynamic of generosity and discipline has been central to lay mendicant since ancient times. Now, with this background and this story, I pose this one main question for this talk. How do relationships between Jain lay people and mendicants reflect the evolving dynamics of religious practices and social hierarchy? In order to address and answer this question, I took a different route. I will state the conclusion first instead of waiting for you to know the conclusion at the end, then give context of the fourfold Jain community, some of the textual sources because we have a lot of students who are attending this talk, a comparative perspective from how different Digambars and Shvetambars are in terms of their relationship with mendicants, ethnographic insights, and future academic research. So, as I said, I will start. I can't see my screen properly because just a sec. All right, this will work now. So the evolving dynamics of lay-mendicant relations highlight a delicate balance between tradition and adaptation. While mendicants maintain spiritual authority, the lay community is increasingly shaping the discourses by accessing knowledge independently. This shift necessitates continuous dialogue between ascetics and householders, ensuring that Jainism remains a living, evolving tradition while staying rooted in its core values of renunciation, knowledge, and compassion. The relationship can also be described as the mendicant-lay relationship manifests as a complex transactional interface marked by ritualistic interdependence and spiritual non-attachment, wherein mutual obligations coexist with an underlying philosophical imperative of transcendence. Now, how I draw this conclusion is we start from here. First and foremost, the context of fourfold community. There are various terms that are used for monk, muni, sadhu, yati, maharaj, which is a commonly used term, and for lay mendicant, women mendicants, aryaka and sadhvi. Śrāvaka and Śrāvika are generally used for lay people, laymen and lay women. Although there is a qualification added to who a Śrāvak is, a person who is just a Jain is a follower of Jainism is Anuyayi, whereas a Śrāvak is specifically one who listens to the discourses, who listens to the, who reads the scriptures and follows the tradition religiously. So in today's talk, our focus is mainly on Śrāvak, Śrāvika, not just the Anuyayis. Now, this is a verse from Saman Suttam, and I'm not reading the verse, but the meaning is very clear as it comes out also in our story from Revati Śrāvika and Mahavir the Mendicant. Charity and worship are the primary duties in the religion of a householder. Without them, one cannot be a Śrāvak. While it says charity and worship, I always regard this as charity and devotion, not just worship, keeping in mind different religious sects within the Jain tradition. For monks and nuns, the main duty is meditation and study of scriptures are the primary duties of a virtuous monk. There can be no monk without them. So this is kind of a standard that has been created in case of monks and nuns and in the case of Śrāvak, Śrāvika. Now, what do we see here? As we reflect into this relationship between mendicants and laity, an important example of their collaboration we can see from this picture, collaboration goes beyond just dan, charitable giving, and bhakti or devotion. When there was growing pressure on the Jains to produce a unified text equivalent to the Bible for Christianity or the Quran for Islam or the Bhagavad Gita for Hindus, the creation of Saman Suttam stands as a landmark effort where mendicant leaders across all prominent Jain sects come along with lay scholars. They come together to compile a unified text that could represent the Jain tradition as a whole. This effort was not merely about textual consolidation. It was a profound statement of unity within the tradition, which is structured as a fourfold community: monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen, each playing a vital role in sustaining this religion. The religious path in Jainism is twofold: the mendicant path meant for monks and nuns and the who renounce worldly life, and the householder's path followed by the laity, who balance spiritual pursuits with social responsibilities. While both groups share the ultimate goal of moksha, liberation, they differ in the intensity of their vows. Mendicants uphold the Mahavratas, the great vows, and through absolute renunciation, whereas the householders observe the anuvratas, smaller, that guide ethical living within a worldly framework. The two pictures here represent this collaboration, reinforcing how the lay and mendicant communities are interdependent, not just in terms of sustenance, but in shaping the intellectual and doctrinal landscape of Jainism. This reminds us that Jainism has thrived not only through renunciation, but also through active engagement, adaptation, and shared responsibilities between monks, nuns, and the lay community. For me, most of the verses that I have drawn in this presentation are drawn from Saman Suttam, because this is a unified representation of the Jain tradition, which was brought together by like-minded minds of once upon a time. Now, this is another two verses from Saman Suttam, which says that and this is a Sangha Sutra. So it is coming as a representation of the fourfold Jain community. May the lotus-like Sangha prosper, which keeps itself aloof from the karmic dirt, just as the lotus keeps itself away from mud and water. The Sangha is a lotus whose long stalk is scriptures, the pericarp is the great vows, the filaments are other virtues, and the petals are the muni. Similarly, the householders frequent the Sangha as the black bees move around the lotus. As the lotus blossoms on account of the sun rays, similarly the Sangha grows on account of the precepts of Jina. This encapsulates the entire philosophy of the community. Now, these are some of the textual sources that discusses in detail about the lay-mendicant relationship. Acharang refers to the existence of the monastic community and lay followers, emphasizing their respective roles in preserving dharma. Uttradhyan Sutra discusses the interdependence between monks, nuns, and the lay followers, highlighting their respective duties. Dashvekalik Sutra mentions the essential role of lay followers in supporting the mendicant order and maintaining the religious community. Bhagavati Sutra discusses the relationship between Mahavir and his lay disciples, illustrating the structured community and the reciprocal duties between monks, nuns, and lay followers. Some of the stories that we see in the Kathas or the story that I just narrated at the beginning of the talk are from Bhagavati Sutra. That is what I have heard from some monks and nuns in their regular discourses. Tattvat Sutra by Uma Swami describes the interconnectedness of the fourfold community and their respective responsibilities in upholding Jain teachings. And the Samay Sar discusses the importance of the ethical path of lay followers. Now, while what we just heard is true and valid, what now we will see is also equally important. Despite of the fact of the reciprocal relationship and close connections between lays and mendicant, one Digambar Sadhu, this is a quote from Kriya Kalap by Pujyapad from Charananuyog, which says that what is the work of a sadhu? What is a monk required to do? And a monk does not give, according to this quote, a monk does not give scriptural knowledge or discourse and does not initiate disciples, but only meditates. While this is specifically for monk, not for the mendicant leaders or acharyas who disciple, this shows that a monk is what Michael Caritas mentioned in his talk about, in his work, he says that Digambar sadhus of southern India, they express a strong individualism. This kind of a quote reminds us of his observation from Digambar sadhus. Now, in a conversation later, one of the monks restated a quote by Acharya Vidyasagar. There was a dialogue between a disciple and Acharya Vidyasagar, another Digambar monk. Disciple asks, can we talk to lay people at night? This is a Digambar monk asking Acharya, can we talk to lay people at night? Acharya responds, Who permits you to speak with lay people in the daytime? This also shows that there is such a strong reverence and such a strong emphasis on self-restraint to not engage in conversations or discussion. So according to this dialogue, a monk should minimize one's interaction with the laity, should not worry for the laity, avoid unnecessary discussion, and always be vigilant about upholding one's great vows. And a further point that is furthermore striking is that according to Acharya Vidyanandji, this was also told to me by a mendicant, by a Digambar monk. He says, Na juro, na joro, joro to bejor joro, which means that a monk should neither establish ties nor foster attachments with the laity. The only connection one can cultivate is with one's soul, which should be everlasting. Na juro, na joro, joro to bejor joro, the bonding should be with the soul. Now, I come back to this point made by Michael Carruthers. The three perspectives align with the observations made by Michael Carruthers, who said that Munis do, of course, participate in relationship de facto, but it is important to stress that such relationships are not recognized in the conception of the Muni or in the formal language of Jains concerning Munis. So Southern Digambar Jainism places extraordinary emphasis on individualism, and that emphasis we saw in the previous quotes. Now, there is a different perspective where Shvetambars are concerned. Here, we see an interesting quote which says, Chattari samano vasaga pannata tam jaha amma pitta samane bhatti samane, mitta samane, sakti samane. This means there are four types of the relationship between mendicant and the lay community is likened to four types of people. Mendicants say that for them, the lay people, the Śrāvaka are like parents, like siblings, like friends, or like a second wife. While Digambars have completely emphasized on minimizing interactions with the lay community, Shvetambars have created relations, have compared in the form of different relations. Lay followers exhibit, and who are these four types of people? Those lay followers who exhibit unwavering love, affection, and devotion towards monks and nuns in all circumstances are regarded as parents. Those lay followers who are affectionate with monks and nuns but become agitated in unfavorable situations are regarded as siblings. Lay followers whose affection is conditional upon favorable or unfavorable circumstances are compared to friends. Lastly, those who follow the monks and nuns for the name's sake, lacking both affection and devotion for the mendicants, are likened to a second wife. This was an interesting quote from Thanang Sutra 430. Now, when we look at the Shvetambar perspective, this also shows that there have been a lot of shift and changes. In the past, when we see the relationship, lay mendicant nuns, sadhavis, spent a lot of time reading or within themselves, or sometimes doing some of the works for monks, like making Rajoharan or Ogha or things like that. But today, in the 21st century, we see that even lay nuns within the Shvetambar tradition are taking really leadership roles in restoration of some temples and in taking important decisions. Viraitan Chandanaji is one example, and we have other examples from the Khatargach Sangh. So based on these two different perspectives, I have kind of, and my own ethnographic insights, I now move on to share some of the differences between this mendicant-lay relationship between the Shwetambar and Digambar traditions. And that is why I also find the whole idea a bit confusing also. Now, Shwetambar mendicant-lay relations, first difference is related to food and interaction. Since Shwetambar mendicants take food 2 to 4 times a day, depending upon the specific sect, the frequent needs for alms foster regular interaction with lay followers as they visit households and engage in conversations. Whereas the Digambar mendicant take food only once a day, which minimizes their dependency on lay interaction for sustenance. Their lifestyle encourage greater withdrawal from lay society. The second important point of distinguish between the two is role in psychology as well-being. Shwetambar nuns often serve as psychological counselors, especially for lay women. They offer guidance for personal and spiritual matters, strengthening their bond with laity. And Dr. Manisha Sethi's book, Escaping the World, has some fantastic examples of how psychological counselors Shwetambar nuns have been to the lay community. Emphasis on mendicants in the Digambar sect. Digambar mendicants are traditionally more inward focused, dedicating their time to meditation and detachment rather than with lay engagement. Shwetambar mendicant lay relations regarding the academic engagement. Many Shwetambar monks and nuns today pursue higher education and degrees. This scholarly focus has added responsibilities that sometimes reduce their interaction with laity. A Shwetambar nun noted that earlier mendicants were primary source of knowledge, but now as the laity has access to multiple sources, information channels, and literature publications, mendicants must also continuously update themselves and their knowledge in order to be more relevant and in order to increase the interaction with the lay community. So this was, I thought, an important point, because when you talk to the lay community, they often say that nowadays monks and nuns do not have time. They are so busy among themselves. And when you ask this question to monks and nuns, that what is the reason for their being so occupied, they say that we have to spend a lot of time updating ourselves with the new knowledge. And so it's, and if we don't do that, then people will stop coming. While the big transition that I found in the Digambar community is that involvement in publications. Digambar mendicants have increasingly entered the world of publications, a domain traditionally managed by lay scholars and lay pundits. This shift has led to greater interaction between mendicants and lay followers through literary engagement. In the past, whenever I went to Digambar Muni or Aryaka, it mostly used to be darshan and a blessing from Pichi. But in my past couple of field visits and trips in Jaipur and meeting Digambar monks and nuns, I have received enormous literature, books, new publications that are coming up under their names, under the banners. So it is difficult to convey, actually, in this short time, the sheer richness and elaboration of gesture, ceremonies, and goods and stories that surround around the not only acts of giving, charity, and devotion. So that's why I feel that this little video will really capture what I intend to say. The video is from Digambar Chaturmas time in Jaipur. It is done with certain directions. It's a short video.
There's no audio, Shivani. Was there supposed to be?
There's no audio?
No, there's no audio.
How do I get the audio?
You might have to reshare your screen and share your audio.
They are basically saying Namostu. It's not much that you are missing without the audio. It's more visual things to see. So this monk was Pranamya Sagarji, who recently have worked a lot on developing yoga and meditation within the Digambar Jain tradition. And his meditation is called Arham Yoga and Dhyan. So you can see from the video, from the faces, from the expression of people, that devotion and charity, even without words, it is just the devotion that really connects the two groups together in the case of Digambars. And a few takeaways from this talk is that unlike individualism, we now have to see that individualism is reconsidered in the case of what we initially saw defines a sadhu. Mendicants are psychological healers, not just concerned about their own spiritual growth, but also concerned about people with whom they have a long-term continuous engagement. Lay mendicant relations therefore goes beyond just dan and gyan. Like if dan is important, then the gyan that is delivered, the discourses that is delivered by monks and nuns equally plays an important role, because that is the guiding principle for the lay community to uphold their vows and to move up in the ladder. Evolving leadership roles among sadhvis is another key takeaway from this research, that sometimes earlier it was mainly some monks would redirect the lay community for some restoration of temple or working on a text, but today this task is also handled by some leader nuns. Now, because as I said,
I'm sorry, Shivani, we have to watch the clock.
Yeah, so this is the last slide. It is just for students. A few areas that has this whole talk actually made me realize that lay mendicant relationship might sound a small and a light topic, but it has a tremendous scope for further research. And these are some of the ways where more students can engage in researching upon monks and nuns. And thank you for the attention. And it was wonderful exploring this topic.
Thank you very much, Shivani, for this very rich presentation. And we just go on to Leonardo to keep the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Shivani. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. Well, you can see my presentation here. Disappearing? Okay, showing. Okay, first of all, I think it's a brilliant opportunity to have you as audience. I'm sorry if I commit some mistakes in my, because I'm a little nervous, and when I'm a little nervous, my proficiency in English somehow disappears. So let's see how it goes. Okay. So, the name of the title of the presentation is Material and Symbolic Exchanges Between Young Śrāvaka and Jain Ascetics. Just to give you a brief preview of my work, is that I'm working on the same topic as Shivani, right? I'm dedicated to this big picture of interactions and relations between householders and monks and nuns, of course. But considering the presentation for today, I choose to focus on the young ones, young Jains, right? Also because of the experience I had there in Pune in the last 2 years, actually. And also because I couldn't find many data or work or publications about this topic. So this is not an institutional approach. I could say that in the ethnography about this range of interactions and relationships, there's anything which is fully dedicated to the young Jains, right? We can see some things, for instance, in Valerie's work. And when we find papers about this topic online, somehow it is more focused on the diaspora, so the institutional spaces for young people, young Jains in the diaspora, and the challenges they're facing while adapting to a foreign culture, right? So, first of all, keep your eyes here, because if we're talking about exchanges, right, material and symbolic, what do the young Jains had to give or to offer to the ascetics? Probably we are quite aware of what they're receiving, but let's try to think about also on what they're sharing together with them. Okay, so departing from exactly where Shivani brought us, where is the place of the young Jains within this exchange, right? Let's start with this question, a very simple question we may ask. Of course, family, the jati is very important when it comes to Jainism in India and abroad, right? So I'll read this for you, okay? And we will think about it. Because the relationship with the doctrine and rituals and with the monastic class has been inherited from a domestic environment and now finds certain conditions to emerge from more personal demands. We are talking about young ones from 14 to 25 years old, maybe even lower than that, even younger than 14 years old, right? And these demands, their personal demands, which arise at this age, will be related to moments which register significant marks in the individual's biography. Okay, specific moments they are facing, challenges they're facing at this moment of their lives, right? Is Diksha the culmination of these interactions? Is a sparkling consideration for Diksha an evidence of how meaningful these interactions can be? Because, for instance, the consideration of Diksha seems to gain relevance at decisive moment for the future of the young ones. It's time to make professional choices, and the consequences will be profound and far-reaching. In this sense, to complete a higher degree of education and to make professional choices is something that has everything to do with engagement in worldly life and the search for common rewards, such as work, wealth, family, and friends, right? So here we're facing two problems and purpose for this presentation. One is to bring into light the perspective of young Jains about their place within the range of interactions and relationships, together with the anxieties and spiritual demands in the face of contemporary challenges. The second part, I don't think I will have time to develop here with you. If I have time, we will see where we go, because it's also the opportunity to provide a summary account and a sociological framework and somehow review what Shivani brought to us into a more sociological, generic perspective of all these exchanges and interactions that are happening, okay? I start with this. This appeared in BBC India, 2019. Why are these youngsters renouncing the world? Well, I think everything can, there's a lot of things which can be said about this, but let's think about the motivation for this article to appear, right? For an outsider, Westerner, suppose, or even in India, We look at young people taking diksha, becoming renouncants, choosing the spiritual lifestyle, renouncing to life, to worldly life, to family, to friends, to work. Well, this is very curious, right? One may raise a lot of questions about this. And this article is quite interesting because, well, one of the things, the conclusions it gives us is the peaceful lifestyle of a monk or a nun, right? The peaceful lifestyle. And also this peaceful lifestyle contrasts with the modern day life, modern daily life, right? So society is changing, it's ever changing. Maybe for traditional countries such as India, contemporary challenges are somehow striking and contrasting with the forms of ancient religions. And these religions offer solutions to some of these problems. But also it is quite interesting how they draw some attention to the retreats, the spiritual retreats these young Jains could attend to, and how it was a transformative experience to many of them. And after this close experience they had together with the monks, to live in the presence of the monks, to live in the upashray, then they could find that this were their path for the rest of their lives. Okay, so here, these are sources. We don't need to go into this with many detail because Shivani told us a lot about the Jain canonical texts. They are limited when it comes to thinking about the young Jains. I mean, even when it comes to the interactions and relationships, is somehow limited because we are talking about doctrines, we are talking about ideal situations. But on the non-canonical literature, we have some more interesting examples. For instance, the Lives of the Jain Elders by Acharya Hemachandra. We have an interesting example of course, it's full of doctrinal inputs, right? And it's presented in a very specific way, but nevertheless, we can find some interactions that are more complex and goes beyond the normative prescriptive text of the scriptures, right? Of course, academic literature is the majority of the works I'm relying here, departing from them, and field observation and interviews. These are the academic literature I'm bringing. You are quite aware of all these works, but the most important for me, for this research I'm developing are, of course, Carruthers, Lawrence Babb, John Cord, Folkert, and Richard Laidlaw and Aim Vallely, right? And the field observations and interviews. This is my experience. This is my experience in India. I was living there from 2023 up to April 2024. I could find some possibilities of interviewing monks, nuns, and householders and young Jains in Pune, in Mumbai, Junagadh, and Nashik, right? It is not a big number if you think about it, because I didn't have opportunity to develop a quantitative research because of many challenges such an endeavor would require, and linguistic limitations as well. I don't have access to all the sources. So for instance, when I have this slash here, 7 monks and 3 nuns, 14 male Śrāvakas and 2 female Śrāvakas, 2 teachers, 2 scholars each. And what it's important for our presentation here is the 10 young Jains I've met. Okay, they're all males, younger one 14 years old, older ones 25 years old, and 6 Jain adults. Okay, the majority of my time there I spent at this place, right? I was attending to, I was studying at the International School for Jain Studies. It's in Pune. And it was right at this place. Now it's no longer there because they moved to the Abhay Prabhavana Museum. If any of you visited that place yet, I would, of course, suggest, because it's amazing. It's an amazing museum. And this photo was taken during Holi, right? It was taken during Holi. In front, what we can see is where the boys. It's a male hostel. We have around 300 male young Jains living there, from 17 up to 25 years old. They are, majority of them come from Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, and Rajasthan. Majority of Stanakavasi, and middle class, high class, some rich families, even with political connections. And as I said, this was during the celebration of Holi, which is a Hindu festival. Of course, they would serve vegetarian food, but only a small minority of Jains would choose the Jain diet, right? The majority of them would eat only from the pure vegetarian food. And I was living there for 9 months. During the Paryushan, I decided to follow Bhyasana, the fasting. And this was a reason for them to approach me. They were really surprised to see someone like me fasting. And after that, our relationship started, and they brought me to the Stanak, and they brought me to the session of Pratikraman, for instance. And this is important. The information here, you don't need to pay attention to it, because it is explaining how this place was built, how it's being managed, by whom. And these photos are also, everything comes from their website, because of course I cannot bring my cell phone to the session of Pratikraman. And this would happen during Paryushan, right? As you may see in the texts, the anthropology, the ethnography about the Jain Sangha, somehow it appears that their religious behavior gets more intense during the celebration of Paryushan. And we couldn't see sessions of Pratikrama during the common days of the year, right? The other days of the year. It would only happen during Paryushan. And well, let's take a look at the demographic data we have here, because this is somehow we may say, my PhD is about this bigger picture. So it goes sociology, history, ethnography all together. But this was a work of ethnography I was trying to develop, right? I was interviewing, I was living with them, and but also the questions I would bring were somehow based on a quantitative data, right? So I was trying to cross these two approaches, quantitative, qualitative. From qualitative approach, I try to get some insights based on a more less data, right? But I go, it depends more on hermeneutics. I need to interpret more what I have in front of me. And sometimes it works. I hope it does. So let's see. This is based on Flugel's work, right? A comparison of data between 1987 and 1999 shows that the total number of resignations increased, right? The growth rate for the 12-year period was 26.75%. If you take a look at the Digambar numbers, it's quite astounding. It's quite impressive how the number of resignations raised. So there is reason for that article by BBC India appear. Also because a lot of these celebrations for Diksha, they are being shared on the internet because they're very big, very beautiful. It's like a birthday party. You have music, you have dance, you have colors. Maybe this plays an important role. It is inspiring for other Jains to look at it. And other reasons as well. One of the common reasons for explaining such a high number of resignations is, well, the challenges of modern world, right? Challenges of the modern world, frustrations. It seems that the worldly life, it's not fulfilling, it's not satisfying, and the religious path is more rewarding, you could say, right? And this growth, as we see here in this slide, is not related to the demographic growth of the Jain community, because there's no proselytism, there's no conversions, as we could see in medieval times, for instance. It is not as big as it was once. So in 1990, the average was one renunciant for every 336 lay people, which would be the highest record among world religions, right? I asked this to some monks, and the monk would not agree with that, because they claim that this is not the real number of the Jain community. And so I was living with these young boys. They were quite anxious about the next results of the India's census. And the last one was in 2011. We're still waiting for to see the new numbers regarding the J Society, if the J Society is growing because of the increasing level of self-consciousness, right? So you have more Jains claiming that they are Jains, while 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, they would recognize and identify themselves as Hindus. So maybe if there's such a change, the ratio wouldn't be, the average wouldn't be as such. Still, it is a high ratio, okay? And you can try to figure out many different answers for this. One of the answers would by a monk, by a Murti Pujak monk, he said this to me, that, well, today you have a very wealthy society, a wealthy community, and the challenges of being a monk today, it's not as hard as it was 2,000 years ago. Somehow it is more easy to be a monk today than it was 2,000 years ago. Others will say, well, it's a prestigious life. You are recognized. It is very rewarding in terms of community, in terms of society. So you can try to picture the different patterns that are crossing there. Sociological patterns, anthropological patterns, psychological patterns as well. Okay, this is a photo I took in Gajpantha Hill. It was a Digambar camp, Kanji Swamipat, and it was around 20-25 young kids living there. They were not allowed to have a cell phone or internet, nothing like that. A bus would pick them up. It was at the base of the Gajpantha Hill. It's a very beautiful place, very, very, very beautiful. We had a very, very beautiful experience there. And they were quite curious regarding our presence there. And they would study spirituality. A bus would pick them up and bring them to school every day. They had proper food and all of that. And they were really happy, at least it seems like. So these are the questions I address to the laity in my interviews, and it's based on the data I showed to you, okay? Some of these are quite simple questions, but somehow brings our attention to some aspects of these interactions and relationships we are thinking about. For instance, for how many generations your family has belonged to Jain community, to the Jaina community? You have always the same answer, because they would say, ever since I remember, we have always been Jains. There was no such a change in the history of our family. Have any family members or friends become or consider becoming renunciants? Would you support his or her decision? Have you ever thought about becoming a monk? What reason would you have for doing so? How often do your family members relate to monks? What is the type of relationship? How often do family members attend festivals, pilgrimage, pujas, and so forth and so on? And these are the questions I address to the monks and nuns. Why is there such a high ratio of monks to lay people? Why are so many young people taking Diksha today? Do you believe that young Jains are moving closer to or further away from spiritual life? Because it seems somehow that they would agree with both tendencies. They would say, no, some young boys, some young Jains, they're moving closer to the spiritual life. Some of them, they are drifting away. It depends, right? And for instance, considering I was living in this hostel, right? Well, it is not the best place to find young Jains who are thinking about taking Diksha, because they are there for studying, right? They are pursuing a career. And they're not thinking about taking Diksha and becoming monks. But nevertheless, if we say that one of the reasons for them to do so is because of the challenges they face in modern society, in contemporary society, well, this is specifically one place where they will find some pressures of the modern life, right? in this precise moment in their life. They're living away from their families. They're living far away from their families. They have to choose a career. They have to choose a profession they will work with. And the consequences of their choices will be far reaching. So they are already facing a lot of pressure. And this pressure brings them problems. We are quite aware of how young people are today facing depression, anxiety, and the young Jains are also vulnerable to these problems as well. And just like Shivani said brilliantly, that they have a role in psychological well-being. I even wrote it. They are psychological healers, and this is what we'll see here. Okay.
Sorry, Leonardo, we have to watch the clock.
How much time do I have? This is my biggest challenge, to fit everything I want to say.
Yeah, I imagine.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay, sorry. It won't do. Okay, real quick. I have some samples here, okay? Some biographical samples here from the hostel I was living, and some mumukshus I interviewed in Mumbai. And okay, let's go here. One of the kids, for instance, he was from Rajasthan. He was far away from his family. And in the first years of his living in Pune, he faced depression. He felt melancholy, isolation. And some friends of his took him to the Stanak. And because of the presence of the monk, he felt such a peace that this changed his approach towards religion. One of the things which are very important to us is the concept of a dharmic family, right? And how the mothers play a very important role in the behavior of the dharmic family. A lot of them would draw inspiration from their mothers, right? And so they have cousins, they have sisters, they have relatives who took Diksha and followed the ascetic path. And this is also a good example for them, right? So I'm trying to summarize what I would say in more details here. And a lot of them take Diksha into consideration after this good experience they had with the monks, right? Some of them, they were facing anxiety and all of these modern problems, which are maybe not as modern as we think. But nevertheless, some of them are still waiting for the opportunity to take Diksha because they are, as they say, the man of the house. They have familiar obligations to fulfill, right? These are two mumukshus I interviewed, 15 and 14 years old in Mumbai. And also they have very good examples from their very domestic behavior. Grandfather, uncle, the mother of one of them wanted to take Diksha to follow the ascetic path. One of them, quite interesting experience because during COVID, he went to live in the Upashray, where he attended to online classes, and he felt that it was such a peaceful place and quiet, and compared to the living outside of the Upashray, the life outside of the Upashray, it's radically different. So for a lot of them, this peace they're feeling, it is the biggest reward when it comes to following the ascetic path. This is an event I joined in London last week, where we have a mumukshu, 25 years old mumukshu who lived in the US, and he came here to visit. He was brought here by the Jain Alert Group, UK, and it was a beautiful celebration, a beautiful event to inspire the young ones, right? To give them a spiritual message for those who are living in the diaspora, which are living so far away from the ascetics, right? They don't have this peaceful presence in their lives. So what can we do with them? Well, it's quite interesting, the biography of this mumukshu here, because he was studying engineer, and he faced some problems in his life as well, some melancholy. He suffered a car accident, and his friends, his professionals, they couldn't help him. Based on what he said, only a monk living really far away, 10,000 miles away from his place, could help him, could bring insight to his problems. And this was meaningful enough for him to take this path, right? One here, and I'll jump to the conclusion. Can I? Okay, just two ones. The Sthanakavasi nun and the Sthanakavasi monk I met in Junagadh, Girnar, right? Both of them are quite interesting examples because the nun, she was 25, she was a doctor, she studied medicine, she was brilliant, she was fulfilling her dream, but it was not enough. It was not enough. It was not satisfying, right? And she started to think about it. Well, suppose if I die tomorrow, where will I be? What is my purpose in life? And this occupation I always dreamed of, it's not rewarding. I'm looking for something which is eternal and pure. And the Jain path, the Jain doctrine could give this to her. And she was much more happy as a nun than as a doctor. The next one is quite interesting because it starts with an example of how these interactions can develop. He was studying engineer also. And well, he was studying so hard to obtain the highest marks, but he couldn't. It was not working. And he came to his guru, and the guru said, well, you should do like this. Start doing good deeds for people without expecting any reward. What they call selfless help. Start with one every day, and then after 2 weeks, you start doing 2 every day. Then 3 weeks, you start doing 3 every day, and let's see how it goes. And after he started doing that, he obtained the highest marks he was expecting to, which he couldn't get just by studying. Okay, of course, James could talk a lot about this because it has something to do with karma. It has something to do with punya. But this is what happened. It doesn't matter how it happened, but it happened. And this is a very good example of a meaningful experience which somehow can convince an individual who has many doubts about his life of what path he should take. Okay? Just to give you here, what could be the experiences which enable such a change? Negative experiences would be depression, unhappiness, isolation, tragedies, frustrations. And positive experiences would be peace at the presence of medicants, good examples, prescriptions of specific attitudes which trigger certain mental dispositions, and meaningful answers to the negative experiences. So when we talk about taking a path, we need to be quite aware of the metaphorical dimensions of this. People think metaphorically and they act metaphorically. And we have a bifurcation and a junction, just like that poem by Robert Frost, right? 2 roads diverged along the yellow wood. So depending on the moment the individual finds himself on his life or his path, well, moksha marga, right? Marga is a path. Considerations about it emerge in the face of the need to reintegrate his experiences under a coherent unity of meaning. If a certain path, such as the worldly, like John Cort said, the path of well-being, lacks strength in its integrity, unity of meaning, the subject will feel attracted to the rewards which are promised by the other path. But the individual doesn't need to change his path in order to absorb the meanings traditionally available only to those who are walking along the other path, the ascetics. Pondering and choosing a path is not something that only comes up in the face of critical experiences. The passage from adolescence to adulthood is a decisive moment when it comes to the point of making choices. The need to reconsider one's choices also comes up in proximity, not long after the choice has already been made. Of course, we have examples of people taking Diksha at 50, 70 years old. But if we are talking about the young ones here, this is what I wanted to highlight, right? The importance of this moment in their lives and how the consideration for Diksha and how this interaction and relationship with monks and nuns play a very important role for them to find peace in their lives. I have many things to say. This is a photo I took at this Digambar community there in Pune as well. And this is me speaking with Murtik Pujak Sadhu in Pune also, okay? Thank you so much for your attention, Jai Jinendra.
Thank you so much, Shivani and Leonardo, for these very fascinating talks. We don't have much time, but I would like to ask both of you to engage in some dialogue, since we are in a session of dialogue, whether you have some points which burn in your head to ask and comment. Shivani and Leonardo.
Yeah. So, okay, you are listening to me, right?
Yes.
Well, I have many questions, many interesting questions about the future of these dharmic families. What are the main challenges into this contemporary society, right? How these relations and interactions are important for the definition of the Jaina identity. Does she think if this ratio will persist? We need, of course, take into consideration the importance of further quantitative data to answer to these questions, right? Also, what are the young ones are giving to the monks? They are not donating, they are still learning. And I could see that they're facing some difficulties when it comes to the proper way of dealing with these donations, how they really engage into this, right? They're not quietly aware of the correct procedures of doing so. They still need to learn about it. These are the main questions for me somehow.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe Shivani would like to respond to that. Shivani?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a fantastic presentation, Leonardo. It shows that you are really working, and a lot of things are yet to be completed, right? See, variations are definitely there. There are a lot of different branches and sects and subsects of variations we have to address. And variations, again, are of two types. One is because there are so many branches that have come out from one big source. And secondly, because times are changing very fast, in the sense that people still they stick to the scriptural sources and what is written there and want to abide by those rules. And there are people who are more liberal in their thinking and want to change with times. So one thing that I noticed again when scriptures or some of the things mentioned in the books present such a narrow, austere a path for the mendicants, right? And today we don't see exactly the same way. So when you ask this question that where is that difference? Why is this big change? So I often heard a term which is called sahanan, which means the capacity to endure the austerities is reducing with the change of time. So we have to keep three things in mind from a Jain perspective: Dravya, Kshetra, Kal, and Bhav. Because things do not remain the same, you see all these changes, variations, and it will keep changing. Like you, in your own research, you saw that how the younger generation look at the things and the kind of things younger generation offer to monks and nuns. And how the elder generation, for example, if I have to I come from a place which is Jaipur, and just next to my hometown, my house, the next lane is, there are two sthanaks. One is by the Terapanth community, Shvetamba Terapanth, and the other is the Murti Pujak and Sthanakvasi community. So we often have this privilege of offering dan, gochari or alms. So if I know that there is a group of young nuns who are coming, or young monks who would be coming to my place for gochari, I will direct the people in my house to prepare either a cake or noodles or something that I like to eat. Because if you look at the scriptures, it is you offer what you eat. You don't make for them, right? So if I prefer to eat some of these Western, because I know these kids are either our cousin brothers or sisters, they come from the same families and they have grown up eating these things. And it is very rare that people will get such foods back. So if I put this question in front of a Digambar mendicant, the Digambar mendicant would would outrightly reject my proposition of offering such things, whether it is a vegan pizza or a vegan vegetarian bowl of noodles. But a Shwetambar mendicant will see from a more liberal perspective that these younger monks and nuns, because they take Diksha at quite a young age, they have eaten this stuff, and there is no harm offering them or eating once in a while. Last, when I went to Jaipur, to India, I took a bar of chocolate, from America, and which I offered, the whole big packet of chocolate. So they are, even though they have taken this mendicant ship, but they haven't renounced the world, right? They still are human beings like us. So I kind of look at them from a very different perspective. I don't know whether this answers all your questions, but this is one perspective to think about as you continue with your research.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Can I
very much.
answer this question by Sohn Shah here?
Yep, I promised I would read out the Q&A,
Yes, now
the
we
Q&A box, so I'll
can go
move
to the question
to
answer.
that. There's a couple of lovely questions and also just a couple of lovely thank yous in there. I'll just start from the top. Anahita asks you, Shivani ji, about Anuyayis. So I'm interested in knowing more about the distinction between Śrāvakas and Anuyayis. What does Jain practice look like for the Anuyayis?
Yeah, so Anahita, that's a wonderful question actually. Śrāvaka, the term actually is made of 3 different letters. Shra, which means faith. Va, which means inspiration to sow the seeds of right religion. And Ka means shedding of your karmas. Now, Śrāvak actually in totality is one who takes any one type of vow. And Anuyai is one who is just following Jainism, not necessarily taking vows. So from the level of being an Anuyai, one climbs up the ladder to a Śrāvak by accepting any kind of vow in your life, in your path, in your householder's path. So it's to simplify the answer, Anuyai is a follower without any vows, even though the person is offering food to monks and nuns. But if the person hasn't accepted any vow, small or big, that differentiates that person from being a Śrāvak.
Hey, thank you. I don't know, Leonardo, if you saw in the Q&A, Anna's comment directing you to have a look at Andrea's work. So
thank you so much.
And then I'm gonna jump one question and then ask the next one for you, Leonardo. So why do you think more people today compared to 20 years ago identify as Jain on the census? What did you find to be the primary motivation for young Jains to follow the faith? Additionally, did you observe any particular resistance among young people towards ritual practices? So there's a lot to unpack there. I'll leave you to it.
No. Of course, excellent questions. I would say that the role played by these Jain institutes, publications, videos, campaigns outside of India and inside of India, they play a very important role because that's what we've seen, this trending, this movement throughout the whole 20th century, right? Vidyalayas and so on. But maybe this became more intense in the last years with the use of internet. So internet plays a very important role, I may say, also for the young ones, because the young ones are really connected to the internet. And we see some pages, some profiles that the very young ones are administrating, right? And and when it comes to, there are other things as well, political questions, cultural questions, because identity is everywhere in the world today. People are discussing identity clashes because of identity. So I think the Jains are also reacting towards this, and they need to recognize themselves as Jains, otherwise they may be overrun by other tendencies, right? It is very important for them to survive. Also, what did you find about the primary motivation for young Jains to follow the faith? Well, family. This what I said, coming from a dharmic family, they are inheriting this faith. But the good examples they have, The good examples they have, this is the biggest inspiration for them, right? And I believe for everyone who follows any kind of spirituality at all, not only the Jains, you need good examples, right? Just to read about the doctrine won't be enough. But after they have a good experience, after they have a meaningful experience, then they will go study. This is what I saw. Then they will study. They become more interested about it. And if I find any particular resistance, no. But it depends on what we call ritual practices. The ritual practices that are mentioned in the, not in the scriptures, but, well, more traditional practices. Because, for instance, I was there doing Pariushan, right? And this place I was in, it was neighbor to a Vidyalaya. And in the Vidyalaya, there was a big celebration with music. And for those who come from the outside, we don't read about this in the scriptures and the Jain doctrine, nothing like that. But it's a manifestation of devotion, of spirituality. And it's, for me, it's quite similar to the, for instance, when I saw the charismatic movement in Brazil, you have the boys sitting on one side, the girls sitting on the other side, music, it is really intense. And it, well, they're not resisting towards this. They love this. It was crowded and they were very happy when this was happening. So it depends on what we call ritual practices, what ritual practices we are trying to frame here. The more dual ones, which they won't find meaningful, probably they will abandon this, they will adapt, they will bring their own ideas. It depends. Like Shivani said, things are always in this tension, right? They are learning, they are adapting, depends. Does this answer your question? Thank you for asking.
Okay, well, thank you for answering. We are running rather short of time, so I'm going to quickly slide through the questions. Mainly, I mean, people keep reiterating amazing presentations. Thank you so much. I think it was a very good sort of collaboration here, a very good dialogue. Shivani ji, Tilo points out that in your comparison between Digambar Shwetambar, there might be a comparison of different things, in the sense that it's a comparison between statements from an idealized discourse in the former case versus a real life case from the latter being the Shwetambar case. And he points out, and I'm assuming based on his own fieldwork, that Digambar monks are similarly involved with temple building projects and various aspects of lay society. Maybe Acharya Vidyasagar didn't want his Muni pupils to talk to laity, but he sure did. So that might be something to take on board. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, that's a good observation, Tito. There are some acharyas within the Digambar community, like Sudha Sagar, who is very much, into among the lay community, mingling with people, always having some projects or some restoration work happening. But also there are lay pundits and scholars with whom I interacted. They highly criticized these efforts. So the tension is always there, as Leonardo also notes.
Okay, thank you so much. Then we have a lot of wonderful people pointing out a lot of interesting stuff. For Leonardo, the comment of John Court might be interesting.
Really, can I address that really quick?
You can address that in like 30 seconds.
Really quick, yeah, really quick.
Do it.
Yeah, because it is limited. Thank you for asking, because you can see my sources are really limited. I was limited to this space, and this is not a religious space. Right? It is a very worldly space. So I couldn't see any examples of this, because if we are really thinking about the young ones, the young Jains, we have to think about a bigger picture, a bigger perspective. And then we will have to bring this many other in-between situations, we may say. Okay.
Thank you very much. I am very aware that we're leaving some comments and some questions unanswered, and I'm very sorry for it, but our time is up. I'm going to quickly hand it back over to Chris, who has a small announcement of our next sessions to make. And then, as this is my last 3 seconds speaking, I want to thank you all from my part for being here. Chris, it's you.
Thank you, Tine, and thank you to our wonderful speakers and presider. I just wanted to point out that our next event will be on March 10th, Intellectual Culture of the Jains Encounters. That will be at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And we have open registration for that on the website. You can go to the dialogues.arihantainstitute.org website where you'll find that. Another exciting announcement is we just recently added the details for the new Research in Jain Studies panel, which is going to happen in May, on May 19th at 8 a.m. Pacific, which is going to be presided by John Court, whose question we just addressed. And we thank you, John, for attending this event and for presiding over this wonderful next event in May, which will feature a number of young and upcoming scholars who are new in Jain studies and the various projects that they are working on. So we invite you to also register for that event or any of the upcoming events. So we have the March, April, and May event coming, and that is all available to you on the Dialogues website. I had dropped the URL into the chat box earlier, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you at the next event. Jai Janendra.